The body and the blood of Jesus Christ.
Body in the blood? Body in the blood?
Catherine.
Body in the blood. The body in the blood. The body and the blood.
Catherine.
The body and the blood.
Catherine.
The body and the blood.
This week on Talking About the Movies, 50 years after the scariest movie ever made came out, can Jason Blum and the people that reignited Michael Myers in the Halloween series for a new generation do the same thing for The Exorcist? We're going to take a look at The Exorcist Believer Plus.
Hey, why are you here?
I got this situation where I need your help.
I need bad friends.
After nearly a decade and by popular demand, wink wink, Sylvester Stallone and Jason Statham lead an all-new group of action stars in The Expend4bles 4, a double feature this week on Talking About the Movies. And welcome to another edition of Talking About the Movies. As we usually do on this show, we talk about the biggest new releases of the weekend, and this weekend we're actually doing that, along with a little bit of catching up. Of course, we're going to talk about The Exorcist Believer, which is the big new release of the weekend, but we're also going to talk about Expend4bles 4, and, yeah, just a heads up to you guys. I've seen a lot of double features in my life. I've been to the movies to see multiple films on occasion every now and then. But I will tell you this. This may have been the worst double feature week I've ever had. So that should give you an idea of what you're heading into with this particular episode. Yeah, with that warning out of the way, let's get to it, and let's start off with the big new release of the weekend, which is The Exorcist Believer. So The Exorcist Believer is being advertised as a direct sequel to The Exorcist. Overall, it's the 6th installment of the series. You have Leslie Odom Jr., Ann Dowd, Jennifer Nettles, and of course the return of Ellen Burstyn here, along with some other characters. We'll get into it as we move along here. This is going to be spoiler territory. If you really do not want to be spoiled by this, then I'll put the timestamp to the next review. So if you really do not want to be spoiled by this, do you really want to be spoiled by... Are you really going to be that upset that I spoiled The Exorcist Believer for you? But anyway, with that said, let's just get to the plot here. The trailer pretty much summed it up for you. You basically have Leslie Odom as this photographer, and his daughter and her friend, they end up getting lost in the woods for a couple of days. And then once they finally find her, the daughter doesn't realize she's been gone for a long time. And as time goes on, they start to realize that something is wrong with her and her best friend. And it turns out they're possessed by the devil, the same devil from the original Exorcist. Which, as the film progresses, Leslie Odom ends up calling Chris McNeil. I couldn't remember the last name. Chris McNeil, played here by Ellen Burstyn, to help him out, and try to help the daughters out to get this demon out of them. And I should preface this by saying, well, before I even tell you about that, might as well tell you my thoughts on the other Exorcist movies. The first Exorcist film, I think I stick with everybody when I say it is one of the scariest films of all time. I think it is a movie that definitely has elements there that are very good. There are a lot of elements that don't really work that well, but the build up and the way the story sets up, the way the scares come out are actually legitimately scary. I mean, there are a lot of moments in The Exorcist that really do hold up after so many years. There are some things in there that don't really hold up as much, but at the same time, I can still see why a lot of people think it's one of the scariest films of all time, especially for someone like me who doesn't really watch a lot of horror movies to begin with. Exorcist II: The Heretic is one of those so bad it's good type of sequels. Like, you can tell it's very cheesy, it's very corny, it's John Borman directing it, but you can tell that they're at least trying to put some effort into it. There are some shots in that movie that still are genuinely haunting, like Linda Blair walking out of her apartment and is walking out of her apartment window and literally about to fall to her death on there. It's just that's legitimately, moments like that are pretty cool to see, but there are a lot of moments in that movie that do not work as well, especially the ending of that movie. The Exorcist 3, I'd probably say, is the best overall film sequel because it takes from the sequel book that came out from William Peter Blatty, Legion. It has a great performance by George C. Scott. The darker elements work very well. There are some legitimately good, terrifying moments in there. I mean, out of all the Exorcist sequels that I've seen, that's probably the best one easily. Exorcist the Beginning, pretty bad prequel, honestly. I honestly prefer the Paul Schrader version Dominion over the Rennie Harlan one, which I remember they had two different versions of that coming out at the same time. And it's funny, I've been saying, I say I like the Paul Schrader one, even though I pretty much made fun of Paul Schrader earlier in the year, but that's another thing altogether. But no, honestly, I think my favorite Exorcist follow-up has been the TV series that was on Fox for a couple of seasons. It actually did a pretty good job of getting away with a lot of stuff that I thought you couldn't get away with on broadcast television, and it actually made for a really entertaining show. But Fox, you know how Fox is, they canceled the show after 2 seasons, and people got upset about it, and they said, suck it up and deal with it, bitches. Just pretty much. So now we have this movie, and now I should preface this by saying what ended up happening for Universal and Blumhouse to bring in The Exorcist, because of course The Exorcist originally was produced by Warner Brothers, and then Morgan Creek bought the film rights later on down the road. 20th Century Fox actually put out Exorcist 3 back in 1990, as well as did the TV series for Fox. It's been going back and forth between the two of them. Universal came in and acquired the distribution rights in 2021 for $400 million, with the intent of launching a new trilogy of Exorcist films, because they were already working on a trilogy of the Halloween films, and in fact the same people that worked on the Halloween films are all throughout this. David Gordon Green directed this. He also co-wrote it with Danny McBride. And so they put $400 million into making a trilogy out of this, and the first film in this is $30 million. So let me ask you something. If this is the first part of a trilogy, and you would put $400 million into making this work, you put in a ton of money for Blumhouse Studios. This is the equivalent of Disney buying Fox for what was it? Was it like $10 billion? I think it was. I can't remember how much it was, but this is kind of their equivalent there. Blumhouse does not spend a ton of money on their movies, which is both a pro and a con. Like sometimes it'll work out in their favor, other times not so much. But let me ask you this. If you saw this movie and you knew that there was going to be a trilogy coming out of this, would you really want to see a trilogy out of this, especially since this film can't even qualify as entertainment for the first movie? The first half of this, the first maybe 30 minutes of this movie showed a lot of promise to it. There's a great scene in the beginning where the photographer is on his vacation with his wife, and there's an earthquake that happens in Haiti, and the wife is injured. He has to choose between the wife and the unborn child, so he has to choose the child, and he basically loses his faith in God. And for the first 30 minutes of the film, it starts off pretty strongly. It starts off like they have a good idea going for it. And I will say Leslie Odom Jr. really is carrying a lot of the load here. He is a really good actor. He's showing a lot of it in this film. He's really one of the best actors in the film. But once the film gets past the 30-minute mark, and then they start bringing in all the other elements of The Exorcist and all these other exorcism movies of its kind, that's where the film falls apart. And I mean falls apart big time. I mean just, wow, this thing fell apart really, really quickly. This is like the equivalent of that roller coaster gag from The Simpsons, where is the Enron roller coaster gag, where it starts off strong and then it just goes down, and then there may be a brief bit of coasting, and then all of a sudden it just goes downhill again, and then it goes straight into the poorhouse. I mean, that's literally where this movie goes to. I mean, this is a film that I won't say had a lot of potential to it, but it did have a really good trailer to get people kind of excited for it, because of course you're bringing back some familiar faces, which we'll get into in just a moment, but it definitely has a lot of the elements that make The Exorcist what it is. Like, you can tell it's an Exorcist film, but at the same time, though, once it gets to the lull in the film, it just kind of falls into the same stereotypical territory we've seen a lot with a lot of exorcism movies. Not just The Exorcist, but exorcism movies in general. I mean, you've seen a lot of movies that pretty much fall into the category of what this movie is trying to do. This is supposed to be the standard of the Exorcist movies, and this looks like a generic exorcism movie when it's all said and done. Like, you don't like any of these other characters in the film. You don't like the other girl's parents. They're kind of dicks for the most part. Like, you don't really like any of the other characters that they establish in here. The only other characters you have to kind of relate to are the two girls because of what they're going through. But even then, that patience dies out big time. Because they can get really, really annoying really damn quickly. I mean, it's amazing how much this fell apart so quickly at the end. And it's not even at the end, but like at the 30-minute mark. I thought maybe it'd just be a little bit of a lull and they'd get back on track, but Nope, it's like that throughout the rest of the film. After the first 30 minutes, it just goes all downhill from there. But let's get to the familiar faces from the original series. I talked about how Ellen Burstyn comes back as Chris McNeil, and I guess they're trying to set her up as the Laurie Strode of the Halloween trilogy because they got Jamie Lee Curtis back for those films. And if you saw the Halloween trilogy, you saw that it at least started off on a stronger note, but then as the two films came along and they tried to add in more political elements to it and more moments that clearly do not need to be in a Halloween film, that's where they start to lose you. But needless to say, once Ellen Burstyn comes in here, you think this is going to be a little bit of a rise back up to somewhat of enjoyment when she comes back into the picture. But nope. She doesn't really do anything in this film. I mean, she doesn't really have a character. She doesn't really have an arc in there. She just feels like she's forced to be in here because, hey, Laurie Strode was in the Halloween trilogy, so you've got to be our Laurie Strode. But Neil's, I'm sorry to tell you this, but nobody remembers The Exorcist because of Chris McNeil as a major character of the film. I mean, I'm sorry, that's like she's not the centerpiece of the movie. Reagan is the centerpiece of the character, which coincidentally enough, that does lead to the ending of the film, which I'll get to here. But to a credit though, Chris McNeil, Ellen Burstyn, I mean, she's doing the best she can here. I mean, this is not a good script for her to work with here, and it's not her fault that she's not given a whole lot to do here in this movie. I mean, like I said, it just feels like an obligatory role for her to be in this film because, you know, it worked with Jamie Lee Curtis in the previous film. So why don't we go in the Halloween film? So why don't we just have her here? But let's go ahead. But let's get to the other big cameo in the film because it's literally the post-credit sequence. You have everything that happened. You know, you have Anne sitting in her home. Actually, she's in the hospital, and she realizes there's somebody behind her. You think it's going to be Victor, but it turns out it's actually Reagan. So they're setting up that Reagan is going to have a major arc in the next couple of films. In fact, even probably be a more significant character, which one would hope will probably mean that these movies will get better. But when she shows up in here, you think this is going to be like the big moment of the film, like you need like how Ghostbusters Afterlife, when you have all the Ghostbusters back in the final climax of the film. You don't really get that. You don't really get that. It's another cameo that just feels very obligatory. It feels like it's being forced into you. It doesn't feel like it's adding anything significant to the plot, her being there. It just feels like an obligation to be there because, hey, it worked when Laurie Strode came back for Halloween. It's just like it just doesn't work. It just really does not work as well as you think it would. And it sadly really just affects the overall ebb and flow of the film itself. Like, you really do expect that this film should be a whole lot better, but then again, I just feel like when they said, "Hey, we're gonna do an Exorcist, we're gonna do a new Exorcist trilogy in the vein of the Halloween films. Just do what you did with the last Halloween films. We don't care because people will rush out to see it." Which, I mean, it's the #1 movie in the country right now. Now it's a $30 million budgeted film, which we don't know if for marketing purposes how much of that was not involved in that, but still, people are still going to go out and see it, and people went out to see it. But yeah, you got him the first time, but what's to stop him from going back the second time or the third time? I mean, The Exorcist does not have that lasting power where to last for multiple movies like the Halloween series does. People will still went to the Halloween movies, even the Rob Zombie ones. But The Exorcist, not so much. Like The Exorcist doesn't have that many great films in that series, except for the first film and the third film. Everything else in that series has been kind of either mediocre or just downright bad. But so overall, like, I am disappointed with this movie. I thought it was going to be at least somewhat better because Jason Blum, you know, say what you will about some of the movies he puts out, the guy knows what he's doing when it comes to these films. Like, these smaller films, sometimes you get really good content out of these smaller films. I mean, who would have thought that Megan, with a trailer that looked as hilariously bad as that was when it came out last year, would turn out to be one of the more fun movies this year. I mean, they knew what Megan was supposed to be. Like, they know what the Insidious movies are supposed to apply to. The Insidious movies have a lot more to them than these movies do. So you think that you'd have one of the great horror films in The Exorcist, and you have a chance to continue this series with a new trilogy. You don't do the same thing that you did at the end of the Halloween films when the people were getting sick and tired of it in the first friggin' movie. my hope is that maybe that this will be a reversal of that. The first movie starts off bad, but then as the next couple of movies go along and they get more creative control of what they want to do with it, they'll get better and better. We have another one that's going to come out in a couple of years, so I'm going to hope that that's the case, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know if this could work out, but I know for right now, this was a major letdown. Now, it's going to be a major letdown for people who are looking at this as the direct sequel to The Exorcist and thinking that it was going to deliver what they said they were going to promise you. I mean, you spent $400 million picking this movie, this series up from Warner Brothers. You better at least do something with it. Not even Warner Brothers, Morgan Creek. Like, you better do something with it. Like, you better have a reason to keep me and some of these people that are still invested in the series invested going forward. But yeah, like I said, it's a disappointment. It's definitely one of the worst films of the year. After starting off so strong, it just craters off and never really gains any life afterwards. And you really come out of it feeling very, very disappointed by the final product. So, yeah, needless to say, this is definitely one of the worst films of the year so far. And that means I give it a big thumbs down. So yeah, that's The Exorcist Believer for you. So, let's keep the horrible, bad movie train going with our next film, and that is The Expendables 4. Of course, Expendables 4 comes after The Expendables 3, because clearly people weren't sick and tired of The Expendables after when that third film came out. The third film barely made any money whatsoever, so why the hell did they think that this was going to work out either? But I might as well talk about the other Expendables films first. I actually don't hate the Expendables movies. I like the first one. It's fun seeing all these action stars together: Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Dolph Lundgren, Terry Crews, all these guys. Like, the first one was a ton of fun. Was a fun movie, very flawed but fun film. The Expendables 2 is probably the best one, is easily the best one of the series. There's no question about it. It is because the action sequences are much more fun. Plus, you have a great climax with everybody together. There's Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Willis going up against Jean-Claude Van Damme, the villain. I mean, it's a good fun ride all the way through at the end. Like, the climax saves that movie from making it. It actually makes that movie better than the first film by a large margin. And then Expendables 3 just feels like a major letdown because, one, it was PG-13 and these movies are rated R. Because we got to get the kids in there, because we got Katniss's boyfriend from the Hunger Games, not Josh Hutcherson, the other guy, Liam Hemsworth, and Ronda Rousey, and I can't remember who else was in there, but Mel Gibson was the villain. Mel Gibson probably was the best thing about that movie, honestly. I mean, he looked like he was having a ton of fun there, but again, PG-13, so yeah, people were already sick and tired of it at that point, and then you have this one, the Exorcist. I keep thinking these EXs are all over the place. The Expendables 4, and you have Jason Statham, Sylvester Stallone, Dolph Lundgren, and Randy Couture back from the previous films. They also bring in such great action stars like Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. I mean, remember the great action movies he's been in, like Get Rich or Die Trying, which really wasn't an action film. It was basically a biopic about his life, and then that's it. I don't know what else he was in that was considered an action movie. Megan Fox, action-packed, man. Transformers, Jonah Hex, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even though she really wasn't the centerpiece of those movies. But you got Tony Jaa. Tony Jaa's a big action star. And Andy Garcia's in the cast as well. This is directed by the same guy that gave us Need for Speed, which Need for Speed was a ton of fun. I'm one of the few people that really like Need for Speed. So, what exactly is the plot of this movie, if you're wondering? So, it's a groundbreaking story. I mean, I can't believe that anybody didn't think of this already. A new generation of stars join the world's top action stars for an adrenaline-fueled adventure in Expendables 4. Armed with every weapon they can get their hands on, the skills to use them, the Expendables are the world's last line of defense and the team that gets called when all other options are off the table. But new team members with new styles and tactics are going to give new blood a whole new meaning. That's literally the description that's on the IMDb page. And if you see the movie, which many of you haven't, but I'll tell you this much, you're going to be very disappointed because they somehow made a worse film than Expendables 3. And they did this because of a couple things. One, Scott Waugh, the director of this, not really that well known as an action director. I thought he was one of the guys who worked on the Angels, the Has Fallen movies, but that was Rick Momoa. But most of the original cast in here doesn't really do a whole lot. Stallone is barely in the movie. His name is behind Jason Statham as the second billed person in there, and he's hardly in the movie. This is his baby. He has nothing to. It's like he's the one that started this off with the first 2 films, and he's barely in the movie. Like half the original cast. The original cast doesn't really do anything. It's mostly just these new characters in here. The visual effects are bad. The action sequences are not that good. Why the hell did you even bother to make this movie and give it $100 million budget too? Like, who was asking for an Expendables movie in 2023? No one. Even people that liked the first 2 movies, like me, didn't like them. And, like, it's just... I'm just confused of why they made this film. Nothing happens in this movie. Nothing happens that warrants another film being made. It's the same stuff they did in the last 3 movies, except not as fun. It's just... It's a mess. It's an unbelievable mess of a film, and it's a film that runs way too long. I mean, it's not long, but like, you're sitting there for nearly 2 hours. It feels like you're sitting there for more than that. It's just like, it's just some. I'm dumbfounded by this. There was no reason this movie needed to be made whatsoever. Like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it, and like. I need a second here. Okay, now that I've taken a second there, was there anything about this movie that was at least redeemable? Was there anything about this that I could say, that was fine? Well, a couple of things. Jason Statham, who I think actually is a pretty good actor. Like, not just a good action star, but a good actor. I mean, he's one of the things that really carries the Meg movies to another level, to at least somewhat enjoyment on those fronts. And here... even though he's not in here a whole lot, he is at least trying. He's at least trying to say, hey, look, my name's attached to this movie too. I have top billing here. I'm gonna at least try to do something here to make it, is to give this something to give this a chance here. And surprisingly, Megan Fox. Like, I know a lot of people don't really think of Megan Fox as a really good actress, and I wouldn't say she's a great actress overall, but she has been in some good stuff that I've actually liked her in. I liked her in Jennifer's Body. I liked her in This Is 40. I liked her in Friends with Kids. I think that she's been in a lot of stuff where she's been very solid in them. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I thought she was fine as April O'Neil. She actually is one of the few one lone bright spot of this movie, of the new people here, that I thought was actually kind of fun to watch. I thought she was actually doing some fun stuff in here. She's not doing like anything that would make me say like this is one of the great actresses working right now, but like her and Jason Statham were at least trying to do something in this movie to keep it afloat. But other than that, though, this movie is a freaking mess of a film. Like, there was no reason whatsoever to bring this series back whatsoever. Even though Lionsgate probably wanted this back because, hey, bringing back franchises is never going to get old. Even though this got old after the second film, but like, it just doesn't work. It's not an entertaining film. There's really not a whole lot there to make me recommend it, except for the 2 things I mentioned. But even then, that's just stretching to find something. It's like trying to find the golden nugget inside of a piece of shit. Because, like, yeah, I'm gonna have to dig through it, but I'm gonna find something in there, even though I would never really do that, because, like, who puts their hand in a piece of shit? I'm getting off topic here. I'm kind of rambling on at this point, but bottom line here, the thing that you should be taking away from this is that The Expendables 4 is a friggin' terrible movie. It is definitely up there with the worst movies of the year, and it really, really is a bad film. So, by this point, it's pretty much out of theaters at this point, and probably a good thing. If you didn't get to see it, good. Save your money on something else. Go see something more enjoyable. Go see something original. Go see something like The Creator right now. Now, go see Dumb Money. Go see any other movie here. Hell, I'll even tell you to go see The Exorcist Believer, because you'll at least like the first 30 minutes of that film. But this, no. Thumbs down. Big thumbs down on that front there. So that is The Expendables 4, and that's going to finally wrap up this episode of talking about the movie. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be back here in 2 weeks with a couple of other movies. I'm going to try to see I'm hoping I can see Dumb Money. That's still playing there. Hopefully that will be there. Hopefully The Creator will still be there, and then Week after that's Five Nights at Freddy's, and then it's going to be kind of a lull after that. We don't have anything too big after Halloween, except for until I think Troubles Band Together in mid-November, and also the Hunger Games movie, the Battle of Songbirds and Snakes. So it's going to be a lot of catching up over the next couple of weeks. So I'll see you for that in a couple of weeks. But if you like what you saw and you want to see more videos like this, check out the Talking About the Movies playlist, and check out hit the like and subscribe button over on the channel here, as well as the Reviewer Network Live. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. So until then, take care.